a very important meeting, right? It could be you're meeting a business partner, you're having an interview for a job, or it could be a wife waiting for a husband to show up so that they can go to a dinner, or a relative or in-laws or what have you, right? Some sort of situation like that. It's 6 p.m. That's when you're supposed to get going, and you look at the watch, it's 6:30 p.m. and the other person does not show up. 7 p.m. doesn't show up. 7:30 p.m. doesn't show up. Okay, what might be going on in your head if it was a business meeting, or if it was an employment interview, or if it was a family relation? So be true to yourself. Think of a person, right, and think what might be going in your head in these 3 different scenarios. So some examples could be a wife thinking, he probably just ended up playing soccer with the boys and he didn't show up. He always does that. Going to in-laws is never important for him. I have to go to my family, he doesn't like it, he's always with his boys playing soccer or whatever he's playing, or video games or what have you. If it's a business meeting, you could be thinking, my pitch was not really great. The investors did not decide to show up. I just messed it up. Might as well get going and try harder next time. Or you could be thinking, I think I did my work pretty good and I had everything in place, and it just happens to be that this person is late, 401, DVP, you know how it is. Let me just keep waiting. So the point is, between those 2 hours, between 6 to 8, depending on what you are focusing on and what meaning you give to the situation, your experience for those 2 hours can drastically change. Does that make sense? So that's the thing. What is your perspective? What is the focus? And what meaning you are deriving from the situation or events at hand can affect your emotion, your experience drastically. What happens when you have a very negative experience in terms of your emotions? You're feeling having a very painful experience, and then you stand up and then you go home, right? You've been fired or laid off, or car breaks down, or somebody didn't show up for the meeting. You go home and you are in a very negative mood, perhaps low self-esteem, perhaps some anger, and you're also trying to find somebody to blame too, right? You walk in the house, guess what? The food is not ready, right? Or something has been broken down. Some furniture broke down. You need some work that needs to be done at home. What happens then is that emotion is going to channel into negative energy, and you're likely to burst out at your wife or your children or your parents or what have you, without them having anything to do with the situation. This has been seen to lead to divorces, obviously, bad relationships, and people even ending up in jail just because they got angry, they start hitting and it continues, so on and so forth. And some of our Muslim brothers have to go through jail system and all that sort of law enforcement because of that sort of situations. The point being that having control of your mind, having the right perspective is very important for a healthy and happy, peaceful life experience, as well as to have appropriate actions and appropriate dealings with different challenges that we face. So this is tying back to what we were talking about last time about how do you invite people to Islam, and one of the factors about it is that understanding the world through an Islamic perspective would really make you resilient and powerful and happy and peaceful, right? And this is something that obviously we lack a lot in the Muslim society, but it's something that we need to tap back into and figure out what's going on. So last time we were talking about a lot of questions about how you would present certain things. So here are a few questions to think about, right? Your boss or your colleagues ask you, hey, Abdullah, how come you don't join us for these, evening parties? Right? You don't have to drink, you can join us. Or, what's going on with pork? What's wrong with pork? Why don't you eat pork? Right? Or, why do you wear hijab, right? Or anything like that. Or it could be coming from your children as well, or youth or teenagers. Why do you have to pray? Why can't I do as Michael does, or as Christina does, or as Joe does, right? How do you explain it to them, and how do you explain it to your family? Obviously, you can explain it in different manners. There's no really right or wrong answers, but obviously, if you can connect well with them, if you can choose an appropriate example, that would help deliver the message strongly. So I'd like to think about it, and I would like to share an example that I like to use, and this is sort of connected to what we talked about last time in the beginning as well. And you can use different analogies. I would like to use the analogy of an air miles card today. Everybody familiar with what an air miles card is? Okay, so it's like, you can think of it as like bonus points card, or, even if you want to think of it as a debit card, right? Let's say a debit card with British pounds, right? So if you have a debit card with British pounds or an air miles card, you understand that these cards don't work at all the places, right? So you can't go to Petro-Canada and use your, debit card which belongs to some bank that, they don't accept in Canada, right? Or if it's an air miles card, you likely cannot get a full tank out of it. Meaning that this card has value, but it's not going to be useful at all places. Okay? So think about it like this way, right? I mean, I would like to give them a full story, whether it be my colleagues or children or what have you, that look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose to create human beings, and He preferred them over all of His creations, right? And part of that creation was Satan and angels, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave this man a free choice, right? And He preferred them over angels and Satan, and He asked them to show respect and honor by prostrating to Him. And you give them the whole story about how they were put in paradise and how everything was open for them. You have everything that's halal and permissible. Go ahead, enjoy, eat and drink, and just enjoy yourself. Except this tree, you don't approach this tree. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who created the tree, and He is the one who gave Adam and his wife the ability to eat from that tree. Right? But as a test, He also said, do not go near that tree, because if you do so, you would have consequences. Right? Number one consequence is that you withdraw yourself from Allah, you lose the love of Allah, you disobey Allah, as well as you would have consequences in your lifestyle. And Satan tried to take all that attention and bring it down to that particular tree, and obviously justifying it, you're going to get this and that and so on and so forth. Right? And this is what's going to happen for us as well, right? So this is something that you can use to create that sort of perspective for your child or for your colleagues. Now, how is that related to the first example we talked about? Is if you start seeing the sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this light, in the right perspective, when you are abstaining from haram, your experience can be much more positive. As opposed to you thinking that, okay, I'm constrained, I can't have fun, I can't have this and that. Right? Then you're saying, okay, fine, I have so many things that are halal and permissible. These type of friends are haram. These type of fun activities are haram. These type of women I cannot marry. These type of dress I cannot, wear. These type of transactions I cannot get involved in. Why? Because this is a test. Right? If I stay away from it, a couple of things would happen. A, I would earn air miles or points or hasanat, good deeds that would help me to have a better status in paradise. Otherwise, I'm not getting there, right? B, my life experience would get better. Meaning because of me doing the right things, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make my life peaceful and more connected to Him. And C is that, I would avoid the danger of being in the hellfire. So this world is not a perfect place, and look my son, look my daughter, look my friend, we have to make it to the paradise, and it has a certain price, it has a certain way to get there, and once you get there, then there is no restriction. Right? So that is sort of a mindset to think about. And now the third point is, we should also be evaluating ourselves, and this is what we did last time as well. So if you're doing a weekly evaluation or a daily evaluation, what did I do today or in this week to get closer to my destination, which is paradise? How did I use my tongue? How did I use my body? How did I use my mind? How did I use my money? Was it getting me closer to Allah or further away from Allah? Once you have that sort of perspective, your life would be different. the meaning that you would give to the life would be different. And obviously the actions that would result from this would be different. Okay? So I hope that this is something that, we start applying more and more in our daily lives. And I can pretty sure that everybody has deficiencies that, we can definitely apply more of these principles in our own life. And then see when we are getting angry, when we are getting frustrated, when we are getting agitated, are we really following these principles, or our perception has changed like the perception of that person who was waiting for that meeting? And if the perception changes, the experience changes, the emotion changes, and the future reactions also changes. Okay, so this is something that I would highly recommend to think about, and also when we are trying to relate to our children or teenagers or youth or even non-Muslims, so that they can understand and relate why you're doing certain things. Okay, and obviously it ties back to what we talked about last time of the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that once we start following these rules as societies, we achieve the maqasid, the aims of Sharia, which is the overall harmony and peace in the society, and protection of life, protection of intellect, protection of lineage, and so on and so forth. Okay. So I have a few things that I would like to discuss that we know from an Islamic perspective, and hopefully it wouldn't be something new, right? It will be something that you have already heard of, read before, but the gap that we have is that it's not being implemented, right? So we'd probably take some few case studies, just like the example that we took earlier, and then see how the meaning could have been changed or the action could have been changed if we were to apply these principles in our life. Okay? Now, how do we apply a principle in our life? Right? So if you know something is good for you, but you're not applying it, how do you apply that? How can you get yourself to start applying it? Okay? So this is something that's very important with any Islamic activity that you do. And it's one of the main themes that you would see in Quran as well. Right? Even you see it in Juz Amma, you'll see it in Surah Al-Baqarah, and so on and so forth. And it's the principles of following knowledge versus following the desires. Okay? Can anybody give me a verse about that? So it's definitely in Juz Amma, so easy to grab, or in Surah Al-Baqarah. Following desires versus following knowledge. What are you have an example? Yes.
Maybe
Okay.
The ayat. So knowledge is that building up your wealth and hoarding is probably not good for you for this world if you do it too much.
Mm-hmm.
And Aakhirah is better, but we still chase.
Okay. Yes. So that's obviously a good one that you can take that indirect one. But I'm saying it's very clear. You would see that words being used. ittaba al-hawa, or following the knowledge, al-ilm. So there are many examples. So that's something to think about. So in Surah Al-Baqarah you have وَلَئِنِ اتَّبَعْتَ أَهْوَاءَهُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَكَ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ. If you were to follow their desires after knowledge has come to you. Okay? So very clear verses that directly indicate you to that. Okay? Then you have in Juz Amma, فَأَمَّا مَنْ طَغَى وَآثَرَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا. So the one who transgresses, and he is always, only after the worldly, accumulating the worldly things. Compared to the one who is fearful of the standing in front of his Lord. Where else do we have? So this is one of the principles, right? So this is a question that I can be asking myself, or you can be asking yourself. Like right now, the action that I'm doing, is it following something that is beneficial for me, is following a knowledge, or following my desire? right? So if I go, I eat a pack of French fries, same thing applies. Is this something I'm doing beneficial, or I'm just following my desires, right? Ice cream, Coke, soda. It applies to your food as well, right? Working out or not working out, being lazy, okay? Choosing to pray on time or not praying on time. Being friends, would I stand up and say, what, I need to go and pray, right? Or would I just shy away from it? So this is the same simple question if you can ask, am I reacting? Something happened at home, somebody says something to me, am I reacting according to my desires, or am I reacting according to the knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me? So this is a very important principle. And the way to do it is practice, right? Practice makes man perfect. So you have to, and I have to start conditioning ourselves to start doing it more and more. And the more we do it, we get into that habit, right? So you're working, you start going on Facebook. It's like 9 o'clock, 9:15, 9:30. You're still on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, WhatsApp, right? And you need to study, or you need to do your work, or you need to clean the room. Whatever you need to do, you're not doing it. But if you start asking yourself this question, am I following my desires, or am I following the knowledge that would get me the benefit? Then your action might change. So just having this practice, conditioning your mind to do the right things would help you change. And B, to review the knowledge. Right? So if there are certain principles that you want to live by, you should have those hadith or those Quranic verses that you can review daily and then see, hey, am I working, or am I behaving, am I reacting, or am I having a behavior according to these verses and these hadith, or is it completely opposite to those? Okay. So now I would first like to share a hadith, and this is something if we can start conditioning our minds to, hopefully we'll have a totally different experience in life. Totally different experience. And the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, which can be translated as, whoever makes the Aakhirah his concern, Allah will gather together his affairs. Okay? And He will place contentment in his heart. And the world will come to him despite his reluctance. And the world will come to him despite his reluctance. And whoever makes the dunya his concern, Allah will scatter his affairs, put poverty before him, and nothing of the world will come to him except what Allah has written for him. Okay? So if you are feeling sad, frustrated, angry, and you were to go and you were to analyze your life under this hadith, you would see a lot of things opening up for you. Okay? And this is what I and many other counselors and coaches do. Right? When we have these one-on-one sessions or these counseling sessions, you look at that life and then you start seeing, where are these patterns or where are these behavior gaps that are definitely falling off from the way, the perspective that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam has given us. And you start seeing the gaps. Okay? Then you start helping the client or the person who's coming here for advice according to those gaps, and you advise him, look brother, you guys have to start working on these things, start making these changes. And those who care, who are willing to make the change, as they start making the changes, they start seeing the results. Okay? So this is something that you and I can start training ourselves and conditioning our mind to do that. Or if you are in a situation in which you're not able to see those gaps, you're too much into a situation, you have developed certain behavioral patterns, and you can't see that, then you come in, you speak to the imam, you speak to a coach, you speak to myself, and then we can help you to see those gaps that you have in the lifestyle, with the intention of changing while being patient. Okay? So this is something that we need to start thinking and reflecting and taking ownership and action. You need to take ownership of how you feel. Right? But the thing is, typically we put the blame on the system, we put the blame on the wife, we put the blame on the husband or the parents or the friends or the employers, and that's why we think, that's why I'm sad. Right? It's because the way you are acting. Right? It's because what meaning you're giving to the challenges and the situation that life throws at you. And obviously there's nothing that life is throwing at you. At the end of the day, it's a plan, it's a qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So let's go back to this hadith. And let's take some few case studies and then see how things change. So whoever makes the akhirah his concern, right? So you're worried about something. You need to start thinking, what am I worried? Why am I depressed? What am I thinking? What am I thinking? You know? So again, if you want to go back to the first example we talked about, what am I focusing on? You know, why has that person not showed up for the meeting? What meaning am I giving it? Okay? And then you start seeing changes. So I'll share some examples that I've seen personally in my life as well. Okay? So, you know, something happens between a husband and a wife, right? You know, the wife misbehaves or the husband misbehaves, or, you know, job loss or something. And then usually the meaning that the person is giving to this situation is related to their self-ego. I am not being respected. I am not being loved. Right? I'm not being given my rights. You know, I'm not considered worthy enough. So if you have these meanings, how would you feel? Right? But you're not realizing this, you know, it's a very instantaneous reaction, and you give these meanings to these situations, and then you start feeling like crap. Right? And then everything else would be negative down the hill from there. Okay? How else can you see this situation? The same thing that happens to you, how can you see the situation? So based on what you have learned, what you have read, or what you might have reviewed from the perspective that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us of this life, how can you view this situation?
Job loss situation?
Yeah, job loss, you know, family, somebody in the family disrespecting you. This is obviously, I've seen this happening, right? Husband getting very agitated, very frustrated because of the meaning he gives to the reaction from his wife. Right? Or, yeah, what meaning would you give it? So I think this is, because this typically really gets a lot of emotion. Or, you know, children disrespecting you or not listening to you. What meaning can you give? So you see clearly the negative meaning that people tend to give. Right? They make it personal and they make it close to their own ego. Right? What positive meaning can you give to that situation? Okay, I hope the question is clear. Yes?
Well, if you lost your job, you can maybe take it as now you're going to have some more time to spend with your family or to learn about things you didn't have time to learn about. Or maybe Allah has something else planned for you instead of this job.
Okay, good. Right, so he's not taking it into mean that, okay, I'm not good, the company does not consider me to be good enough. He's not putting in a political meaning that, you know what, this guy Joe, you know, he always was talking with the boss and, you know, had a very good relationship, so he stayed and, you know, he got me laid off. You know, he did not represent my work properly, so on and so forth. Okay, good. Okay, how about if a close loved one disrespects you? So after everything that you have been putting into the relationship, she or he disrespects you, or does not listen to you, or does not do things that, you know, they have agreed to do. Okay, would you take it as a challenge to your personal respect and your personal ego, or can there be a different meaning to that? Mm-hmm. Is there a raised hand? So okay, so think about it like this. Okay, your friend comes and tells you, hey, you know what? Every time, you know, we have this thing, you know, I go home, the food is never ready, you know, or it's not cooked properly, or, you know, the house is never cleaned, right? Or vice versa, you know, he's never on time, you know, I have to do everything by myself. Whenever you have to go to my parents, he's not showing up, you know, things like that. Right? And I think, you know what, he does not respect me, or she does not respect me. She has all the time for, you know, tabloid and, you know, operas and this and that, and he has all the times for, you know, soccer and video games, but I have no value in his life or in her life. You know, I'm not respected properly, and that's it, but I can't take it, and, you know, I'm going to take action. What would you tell him? Right? So you can see that he is clearly taking a personal attack at himself, right? His ego is hurt, right? Okay? Okay, so now if you turn the situation around, first of all, realize it has nothing to do with you in general, right? This is a problem from other person. She is overreacting or he is overreacting. He is not controlling his anger. She is not controlling his anger, right? So you take yourself out of that picture, right? You start using third-person pronouns, if you will, right? So your personal ego is not affected. Okay, it has nothing. It does not necessarily have anything to do with you, right? It's the behavioral issue from another person. Many times, if somebody else has a behavioral issue, people tend to associate it with their own personal ego, and that causes a lot of hurt, right? Now, if you turn the situation around, whoever it is, it could be the parents, it could be the child, it could be the wife, it could be the husband, whatever it is, right? You turn that around to them. Okay, assuming you don't have a problem, that's a different topic itself, right? Assuming it's not your fault, it's your expectations that are not being met, and it's not, and it does happen, right? It's not your fault, it's just a behavioral issue from somebody else. He just gets angry or she gets angry, right? So you treat it like a situation, like an issue that they have, right? Such as they're coughing, right? You want to have a nap and somebody is snoring, right? It's their issue. It's not somebody's not trying to hurt your ego, not trying to hurt your, disrespect you. It's just an issue that they have. Make sense? So if you change that perspective that, okay, look, first of all, he or she has that issue. Alhamdulillah, I don't have that issue. If I had it, then it would be affecting my akhirah. Yes or no? Right? So now if your concern becomes whoever makes the akhirah his concern, right? You'll be thinking, look, if I had that problem and I'm like, flipping out left, right, and center, and I'm misbehaving and I'm not, fulfilling my commitments, then my akhirah is jeopardized, right? Now, if I react with patience to this situation, my air miles point go up or down, right? My hasanat goes up or down. Who would think like that? Whoever makes akhirah is concerned. Right? But if your concern is my ego, my respect, how am I treated, what's going on, how are people looking at me, obviously you're not going to think like that. Right? So this thing has a lot of meaning. What is your concern? Right? The jobless example the brother was discussing. If your concern is akhirah, yes. If your concern is, what's going on in my RSP, my bank balance is affected now. The check is not coming. Right? You just flip out. So that's something very important thing. Are we seeing it from an akhirah perspective? Am I seeing it as an opportunity to get my akhirah points up or my air miles point up, whatever you want to call the analogy? Or am I seeing it as my thing of this dunya, my respect, my ego, my honor? How am I looking at it? So this is something very important to remember. And same thing comes in, right? Like for example, the ending of the hadith about the wealth. Right? If your concern is akhirah, the wealth and the things of the dunya, whether it be wealth, status, or honor, what have you, will come to you regardless. So why, be so impatient about it, or why be frustrated about it? It will come regardless. Okay, so we'll take another hadith, right? And I hope you guys can come up with some case studies and some practical examples. Because the more you start applying it, the more you're conditioning your mind to deal with those situations. And I hope that as you're driving home or as you are thinking right now, you would try to think examples from your life, present life or past, that you have noticed yourself to be really hurt, okay? Or feeling down or depressed or angry or frustrated. So this is from Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu anhuma, that he reports from the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One day I was riding a horse or a camel behind the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He told me certain words, right? He said, "Young man, I will teach you some words." And then they start. Be mindful of Allah and He will take care of you. Okay, so this is principle number 1. So you're trying to take a look at your day, at your life, at your situation, at your problem. First question is, what am I doing with the sharia, with the rules of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And this goes back to the earlier example that we talked about, right? This thing about Adam alayhi salam and his wife and the paradise and the tree. And this is connecting you to that, look, your disobedience to Allah has consequences on the quality of life in this dunya as well. Right? So because look, they were in paradise and obviously they get shifted to the dunya, right? And they were forgiven and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted their tawbah. But at the end of the day, the life was affected, right? So, am I taking care of the deen, the sharia, the limits, the boundaries of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or not? Okay? And then he sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, be mindful of Him and you shall find Him at your side. Right? So if you want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be supporting you, right? Again, protect His hudud, protect His sharia, protect His laws. Okay? And then what does it mean that He will be at your side? Would that mean that, okay, I want a palace, I'll have a palace, I want like $1 million, I would have that? right? What does it mean to be at your side? Right? Now this connects back to what your purpose is. If your concern is Akhirah and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is arranging your affairs in a way that you would have a successful life in Akhirah and you would have content and peace in this dunya, isn't it success? Right? He arranges your affairs because He knows what test would cause your failure and what test would cause your success. Right? Because having a job is a test, not having a job is a test. Having peace at home is a test, and not having peace at home is a test. Having lots of money is a test, and not having enough money is also a test. Both things are tests. What is needed for you and I at this specific time? Who knows is best? Myself or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Right? So very important to think about this. So then you would think, okay, look, you know what? I've been trying to do this for a very long time. I'm trying to get this business running. I'm trying to get my children fixed. I'm trying to get married. I'm trying to do this, whatever, right? And today is February, this and that, 2017. It still has not happened, right? You and I need to realize that it is Allah's choice that it should not happen for us in February. Yes, I would like to have it today, yesterday, last month, last year, but Allah is choosing that I should not have it, right? So I have a plan, I have a wish, and Allah has a wish that get implemented, of course. So whose plan is perfect? I'm thinking about today, I'm thinking about short-term benefit, instant gratification, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not want me to have this, right? Now it goes back to your trust, right? When you say, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينَ, and you say, I believe in Allah, I trust in Allah. What is your expectation of Allah? This choice, is it good for you or is it bad for you? Right? So this is something, if you have that perspective, really, would you be sad and depressed? Right? It's just about conditioning your mind that, look, okay, Allah is making that choice, so, that's why I don't have it, or that's why I have it, Okay, then the third point, if you ask of Allah. Simple thing, do we really ask? And what is asking? What is dua? How is the dua to be done? Is it a dua or is it an order? Right? So I deal with people, they're like, okay, I've been asking, I don't have it. I still have the same problems. The du'as are not being accepted. How do you know that the dua is not being accepted? Right? So you're making a statement, obviously it's going to have effect on your emotion and your mind, but how do you know the dua is not being accepted? Right? What is your goal? Is your goal dunya? If your goal is dunya, that means I want this when I want it. If your goal is akhirah, then I want this at a time it's good for me. Which means that if you make dua and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is delaying something for you, right? Or He might be replacing it with something else, or He might be removing a trouble or a harm or a calamity or a trial that was to befall you because of your dua got accepted. You just didn't know, right? So again, the meaning that you give to a situation would have a drastic or an amazing impact on your life. Okay? So the situation is, I've been asking for something and I don't have it today. Or I don't have it yet. Somebody can give it the meaning, you know what? Allah is not accepting my dua. Allah does not like me. I have too many sins, Allah is not accepting my dua. Somebody can give the meaning that, you know what? I have to do more istighfar and I believe that Allah is accepting my dua. In a way that He, from His own knowledge and His own wisdom, knows it and I don't know. Okay? So that depends on your trust and how you're conditioning your mind and what meaning you give to your life. Right? If the meaning is, okay, I want things, at my own orders, then obviously you can have a different experience. Okay. So that was about dua. So another thing then, know that if the whole world were to gather together in order to bring a benefit to you, they will not be able to help you except what Allah has written for you. And if the whole world were to gather together in order to harm you, they would not harm you except if Allah has written so. The pens have been lifted and the pages are dry. Okay. Now, you take this and you take any relationship that you have a problem with. Whether it's your competitors, your business relationships, your family relationships, your cousin, your aunts, your uncles, your parents, your wife, your in-laws, your husband, any relationship, okay? and you see, you go deep, what is the problem between you and them? Right? If you think that they are the ones who are causing you unhappiness, or they are the ones who are causing you destruction, you need to go back and revisit. Do they have the power? Right? Even if somebody disrespected you or did not fulfill the promise, at the end of the day, what meaning are you giving it? Is it something that Allah made you face? Or is it something that, a'udhu billah, they did it on their own accord? Right? And that is why some of the Sahaba and the Salaf would say that, when we would see this sort of, misbehavior from our horse or even our wives or our families, we would relate it that it's related to some action I did. Right? So this is the perspective, right? So you are thinking, my perspective is Aakhirah. I did some sins and Allah made it a way for me to cleanse it. Alhamdulillah, I got some debt paid off. Right? Or if you're thinking, no, so if you're thinking of it competition from a worldly level, you would feel differently. And now this has nothing to do with, nobody should try to improve themselves and this and that. I'm talking about your own perspective. Right? If something happens to you, that you don't have a choice. Right? Obviously, if you steal and then somebody, fires you, or you cheat and somebody fires you, and then you say, okay, now obviously that's a different situation, right? This is if things happen to you without your negligence, without your shortcoming, right? What meaning would you give it to? Right? Would you give it that, I'm not happy or successful because of this and that person, or that, this is from Allah and He is making me face it, so let me take advantage of it. Right? So this becomes on you and I building trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And how can we do that? Again, conditioning. So when you are praying and when you are praising Allah and you're saying Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, and you're reciting Iyaka na'budu wa Iyaka nasta'een, you're making your du'as and you're saying Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana wa fil akhirati hasana wa qina adhaban nar, and this and that and so on and so forth. Let it condition in your mind. Let it sink in. And then you take all that, okay, look, this is what I believe about Allah, this is what I've asked Allah, and then you apply it to all these challenging situations. All right, so last one that we would take is, again, what the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, amazing is the affair of the believer. Verily, all his affair is good. And this is not for anyone except the believer. So only the person who believes in Allah, who believes in the qadr of Allah, who believes that Allah has ultimate and complete authority and nothing can happen except by the will of Allah, who believes in the Aakhirah, who believes in meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, can have this condition and properly settled in their heart and mind to be able to react in this manner. Which is that if something of good, something that makes him happy befalls him, he is grateful, he is thankful, right? Because he's appreciating it. And this is the problem with appreciation versus expectation, right? If we expect this much, if we get this much, then we're always complaining. But if we don't expect this much and we are having a more of an appreciative behavior, if we realize that we do not have any rights upon Allah in terms of having an eyesight, having the ability to breathe, having the ability to see, having the ability to hear, and it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who is giving us this as a favor, this peace that we have, the homes that we have, the food that we have, like, do we have a right on these things, or is it a favor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Are we being thankful? And this is one of the qualities that we need to ask ourselves. Am I grateful? What am I grateful for? Or am I taking things for granted? Right? So you have a wife, you have tons of expectations of her. Granted, right? I mean, how? Why? Right? People don't even have a wife. Right? You have a child, you have tons of expectations of him or her. Right? Again, same thing. Like, why? So something to think about, like, are we having a very high expectations, or are we being appreciative? Right? And what about our expectations from our own self? What is my expectation in terms of my worship to Allah, in terms of my contribution to the society, in terms of my contribution to the community? What is my own expectation? And that's probably like very low, right? And expectations of others is very high in general. Right? So this is something we need to see, where is our balance of appreciation and expectations. And if something of harm, something hurtful befalls him, he is patient and that is good for him. Right? So again now, It's something we need to see how we are applying it in our different situation. So if I were to recap, we started with the meaning that you give to a situation or the meaning that you give to an experience can have a lot of effect on your emotional and your heart state. Okay? And we talk about the example of what meaning are you giving it? Are you taking it to your personal ego, or you're taking it to the negative characteristics of the person on the opposite side, not appreciating you, so on and so forth. That's one. Then we started, coming back of our perspective of the life and the halal and the haram and the hudud of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How do you view it in your own life, and how do you explain it to your children, and how do you explain it to the non-Muslim community around you, right? So that explanation also has a big impact on how you practice the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? And then we started seeing that this principle that we should be asking ourselves, am I following my desires, or am I following the knowledge? Am I doing something that I want to do, instant gratification, or am I doing something that will be beneficial for what I want to achieve, and whatever that may be? Okay? Then from these things is, number one is a shukr, right? How much appreciative am I? Am I appreciating what I am receiving, or am I always worrying about the gap between the reality and my own expectations? Right? And your own expectation and my own expectations of other people is something in our head. We have created it. If we are going to keep it too high, we won't be happy. Right? Look what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, khudil afw. One of the meaning is that you take from people what is easy, what they can give easily. Right? If you expect too much from them, you're always tight and you're always constrained and constricted. You're having a tight chest, always worried, and always comparing and evaluating. I'm not getting enough and this and that. You won't be happy. And then to look at people below you. Don't take things for granted. You have eyesight, I have eyesight, alhamdulillah, and we have this and we have food and this and that. Compared to people who don't have it. Do we have a right on it, or is it a favor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we have it? A related concept to this is super high expectation which are not even realistic. Right? And this is something that we get a lot from media. Right? Your expectation of a happy marital relationship is too high and unrealistic because of the stuff that people see and portray on TV or media and other channels. Right? And then you don't see that sort of stuff happening at home because your expectation is so unrealistic in the first place. It does not exist in reality. So, having realistic expectation and being grateful. And then the fourth principle is patience. Right? Patience. Patience means that, I won't have something when I want it, how I want it. Your dua may take time to get the exact result that you want, or it might give you a better result, but it might need some time. It might need time to change. It might need consistent efforts to achieve what you want to achieve. So patience, again, is very highly emphasized in Quran. So when you read those verses, compare yourself. Do I have the quality of shukr, gratitude? Do I have the quality of patience when it comes into consistent efforts and when it comes to the du'as? Okay, and then the meaning of ego, right? Is my concern Aakhirah, or is my concern this dunya? If it's Aakhirah, then I'm thinking about the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If it's this dunya, then I'm thinking about how is this person treating me? What respect am I getting? What treatment am I getting? Right? And that is very easy to shatter and very easy to be hurt. Right? I mean, do you know this thing right now? We were president of one of the topmost countries in this world. Right? And a lot of time he is talking about things that are related to his own perception. Why do people say this about me? This did not happen. So on and so forth. Right? And you see the messaging, right? Where the messaging coming? And don't you think it's giving him a lot of stress and anxiety? Because of this perception, right? Ego, respect, the demands, the expectations. So wrapping up again, focus. What are you focusing on? What meaning are you giving it to the situation around you, and what action will you take to make it better? So we'll leave it at that, and I hope that it will be put into practical use. Okay? If you want help, if you need help, if you want to have a session anytime, just let us know. I'll be more than willing to sit down and then help you identify the gaps that you might have it, that might help you to pinpoint and be laser focused and go and fix the right things, inshallah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk, wa sallallahu ta'ala ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa sallam. Jazakumullahu khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sorry.